Hello, everybody. Welcome to Untether.tv. I'm your host and the founder, Rob Woodbridge. You know why you come here. You come here to hear the stories about the guys and the gals that are creating industry because of mobile. They're changing the way that we do things before you even know that you can do those things. And I got a great guest here today. Man, I'm very excited about this. If you're in the mobile industry and you understand crowdsourcing, you are going to love this. So I got a question for you. Is how does mobile move science forward? This is a question that I have pondered, that everybody has pondered. What is the real value of mobile? Well, if you're inventive, if you understand crowdsourcing and the reach that is possible from mobile, you're a little bit on your way. If you have a vision to be Mother Nature's pulse, well, now that's a big vision. Mobile can help that. Plus, it helps having National Geographic as an investor, and that's who we're talking with. That's the guest we're talking with today. I'm talking about Project NOAA, a tool to explore and document wildlife and a platform to harness citizen scientists everywhere. And here to talk about this awesome project is the Chief Leaf, Yasser Ansari. Yasser, man, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Rob, it's awesome to be here. I love what you guys are doing.
Chief Leaf, eh? Chief Leaf.
Yes. Chief Leaf. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, we're a humble and, exciting startup. We're having fun with it. You know, the big C-level acronyms don't really appeal to us. We're just having fun. Chief Leaf. We have a leaf in the logo. We're rolling with it. We're having a blast.
You know what? For those, you've been around since 2010, but for those of you, and you're in New York City, and you got that beautiful seal behind you, National Geographic. You're in the National Geographic offices in New York City. For those of people who don't know what Project NOAA is, we featured it on This Week in Location-Based Marketing a couple of episodes ago. I'm blown away by what you're doing. Tell everybody so that they can be as impressed as I am, please.
So with Project NOAA, we've really set out to create a butterfly net for the 21st century. So using the full capabilities and full power of our mobile devices, how can we turn them into the most powerful window into the natural world ever? So as you know, there's so many compelling and cool applications out there fighting for our attention. We wanted to set out to create something so captivating and kind of engaging, but focused on nature and wildlife. So there's all these terminology and these kind of trends that we've picked up on, this notion of disconnecting to nature, nature deficit disorder, that sort of stuff, no child left inside. And so we really have just tapped into that movement and provided a mobile tool set and a location-based tool set in order to mobilize a new generation of nature explorers. And what we like to say is, convert a mass of people to the green side and create an unstoppable army of nature nerds.
An unstoppable army of nature nerds. God, you know what? So you were telling me before that you've been compared to, basically, if Darwin had invented Foursquare. How did that go? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so a couple times when people have talked about us, or we had some press and Mashable a couple weeks ago, and they use this terminology that's kind of stuck with us a little bit. Imagine if Charles Darwin had created Foursquare. So instead of checking into locations by sharing photos and observations, you're kind of checking in nature. And so, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but to kind of get people a quick introduction to what we're trying to do in the space that we're playing in, it works fairly well.
Well, I mean, it creates this great visual, but you're so much deeper than this, because ultimately you are crowdsourcing, gathering of information, identifying what plants, any kind of bioorganism, anything can be identified through what you're doing, right?
Right, we're 100% species agnostic, so we don't care what it is that you want to know about, as long as it's not like a human being. That's the only kind of area that we just kind of try to avoid. But any living thing on the planet, and we get photos from microscopes, so microorganisms and that sort of stuff. And we hope that once we go intergalactic, that any sort of life that's found on different planets would be fair game as well.
I mean, Project NOAA. Explain what that means, Project NOAA. Because I mean, is there a double meaning to NOAA here?
Yeah, we're not trying to push some sort of biblical agenda by any means, but the NOAA is kind of like a fun riff off of this idea of like collecting specimens, right? And that's kind of where the biblical relationship ends. It actually is what we call a backronym. So we've backed into this acronym. So NOAA stands for Networked Organisms and Habitats. And so that was kind of what we called this project. We wanted to connect the whole world, the biodiversity of the entire planet through one large network. And so we called the project this like networked organisms and habitat project. And we were like, whoa, that breaks down to NOAA. So this is Project NOAA. And so we've kind of run with it. It's fun. It's memorable. It's digestible. And we're sticking with it.
You are stuck with it. I mean, it is a great name. Project NOAA, biblical or not. I think you've got two visions here. You've got Darwin's Foursquare and Noah. Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Okay. So I said it in the introduction. You have a vision to measure Mother Nature's pulse. This is this is one of those visions that is so big. I'm of the SETI generation, right? When network computers became a little bit more mainstream, that every desktop, every laptop, every desktop was connected to the internet, which was a big first step. Offices became networked. And then, for those of you who don't know what SETI is, it's the search for extraterrestrial. SETI, search for extraterrestrials. And what this was is it basically used your downtime processing power on your computer to process signal coming in from outer space. And it was the coolest thing ever. It was crowdsourcing computer power for doing this. So it was the first thing I thought about with what you are doing, but you're doing it a little bit more active. You classify these, but so talk about the vision of measuring Mother Nature's pulse. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so in parallel to this idea, this vision, this dream, like overarching vision of creating this way to measure Mother Nature's pulse, it's this idea of becoming like the go-to platform for documenting the entire world, right? So very early on in our existence, there was a big oil spill in the U.S. in the Gulf, right? The BP oil spill. And what we found out a lot later was that a group of people got together to start documenting impacted animals. And what we heard was that they actually modeled their response and created an application for their first responders, their nature first responders, based on the Project NOAA prototype that we had just recently rolled out. And so it was at that time, imagine if there is like an Earth kind of catastrophe, like an oil spill, and animals and habitats are being impacted, or if there's a threat of an invasive species spreading across from the East Coast to the West Coast. Our users, our Project NOAA members, are these human sensors, right? And they're dispersed across the entire planet. And if we can encourage them and give them specific tasks or things to look out for, we found that they're more than willing to take a few moments to document those things. And so think of it as like an APB system. If there's an oil spill on the coast, or if there's a crazy infestation of these particular invasive species, we let our community members know, and they go out and they start sharing those things. So those are kind of in the emergency type of catastrophic settings. But even outside of those situations, just think about people as we scale up that are walking on their way to work, on their way to school, or they're taking a hike, and they start spending a few minutes to document things. As that stuff starts coming in, and we're now at a point where we're seeing activity through our community in our network on average of every minute of every day, we're getting information about things all over the planet. And so in that sense, we are kind of like putting our finger on the pulse of Mother Nature. And that's what we want to kind of ultimately become, is the most powerful way to get information on the state of biodiversity on the planet and get that information in real time, but put together a really powerful pipeline that could be used for whatever purpose that comes up.
So it's it's so cool because I don't think that there could have been another time where you could do this, right? Like this is the perfect marriage of technology and science and willingness from as you call them, citizen scientists, isn't it?
Right. I mean, it is the exact perfect time to do this. And really quickly, how we I'd been thinking about this idea for quite some time, and maybe this is a quick segue into
where do you
background,
come from,
so you
man?
kind of who I am and what planet I come from. And so I was born and raised in Southern California, spent a lot of time outdoors, mostly in the kind of coastal environment that I grew up in. I studied some pretty hardcore biological sciences, molecular biology, bioinformatics, did some genomic research at the Salk Institute in La Jolla. And so I geeked out really hardcore on the molecular level of biology, which was awesome. And then in total typical fashion, I ditched the lab and I moved into the mobile world. So I worked for some big Japanese device manufacturers, one called Kyocera. And then I worked for Qualcomm for a couple years. I was based in San Diego. And then I moved to New York in 2008 to attend grad school at NYU's Interactive Telecommunications Program, or ITP.
Yeah, hold on one second,
like,
Yasser, because I got to understand. So, I mean, you left the lab, and the allure of mobile brought you out.
It was the complete allure of mobile. I mean, I love technology. Ultimately, that's kind of the grand unifying theme for me. I love disruptive, new, kind of cutting edge technology. When I looked at mobile, and when I looked at these mobile devices, it was very clear to me this is the most intimate piece of technology we've ever created as a species. And this was back in the early 2000s, right? Long before iPhones and Android and all that stuff. And you already knew it was just going to be this thing that just changed the face of the planet. And so what's funny though is, I've been working on mobile apps, back on Brew and Java midlets and all these funny little downloadable crappy apps. And it wasn't until the iPhone got some steam when my mom finally asked me, "Hey Yasser, how can I download an app to my phone? Or what's an app for your phone?" And I'm like, "Mom, we've been working on apps for like the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And it took someone as powerful and as kind of, well known as Apple to really put this notion of downloadable apps and using your mobile device as kind of a conduit to the world. And so 2008, when I started grad school, the App Store didn't even exist yet. You had to kind of save the apps to your home screen. And in parallel, I wanted to kind of marry those two things that I'd always loved, right? Which is nature, biology, the outdoors, and this power of technology. And so what I started seeing was that all these scientists, that were trying to collect this like really critical data, whether it's an invasive species or just counts on the distribution and range of particular organisms, they had these really antiquated ways of calling out to the community. So like a couple of the projects that I looked at you had to download this PDF, you had to print it out, you had to fill it out, add your Latin long, you had to like physically mail it to his office in Chicago to contribute a data point. And so I'm like, this is ridiculous, this is 2008, and so I kind of came up with this notion of like, what can we do if we harness the mobile device in this particular space? And we came up with this idea of like, what if we created a centralized mobile platform and all these different projects, whether it's tracking squirrels or invasive species or, the blooming of time of flowers, could be featured as what we ended up calling missions within the Project Noah platform. So in that sense, when we talk about creating a platform for citizen science in a way for researchers to tap into that audience, that's what we're talking about.
It's but it's a big vision, isn't it? Like it's a grandiose vision, so in context, I mean, you start in the space, you start in molecular biology and bioinformatics, and you go into Kyocera, you go to Qualcomm, you move to New York. What happens in New York that turns you? Did you always have the idea to be an entrepreneur? Was it always in your head? Did you always feel that burn? Or what was it that converted you, that brought you into this world, that made you, I think, I'm an entrepreneur, one entrepreneur into another, that kind of pushed you off the crazy end into this space, because you are a little crazy to be an entrepreneur. So what was it in New York what brought you there? What landed you there?
I think New York just kind of
brings out the crazy in you. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Crazy, but I think I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. I was just talking to my mom recently about my first entrepreneurial endeavor. I was about 5 or 6 years old, she says, and I got a red wagon, those like little radio flyer wagons. And what I started doing was I'd go to the mailboxes on our kind of suburban block, and I took out everyone's mail from the mailbox and delivered it to their door and asked for tips. And so this worked really, as a 6-year-old cute little kid with a bow tie, I was making dough, I was getting $5 or $6. I mean, that was like millions of dollars back then. And I also learned kind of really quickly on the challenges of being an entrepreneur is as I rotated around my block, I got to the front door of a neighbor, a nice guy who happened to be a lawyer. And he basically chewed me out for actually opening, mailbox like it's a big thing. He's got all this privileged information and all these letters. And so I got scolded. Yeah, that was my first brushing with lawyers. But within 24 hours, I had my first, success and failure. But moving, through kind of from the lab to kind of the mobile world, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always worked in the kind of business development realms, emerging technologies. I generated a lot of intellectual property for the companies I worked for, devising patents that got, awarded eventually. And what New York gave me a chance to do is this program was for the first time in my professional career, I wasn't driven specifically by ROI and like, well-sounded, business plans. It was, business models. It was really, I want to cut loose. I want to have fun. I want to build something that I'm passionate about that touches on the things that I love. And if we do it well, and if we can build a huge community around it, we're pretty smart and savvy. We have a lot of friends who are smart and savvy. We'll figure out a way to make a lifestyle and a sustainable business out of it. And that's kind of how it came. And the program at NYU allowed me to cut loose. You're surrounded by people that are trying to do the same thing. It was a very encouraging and supportive process. But I think I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had a couple fun things I did in college that weren't too big. And so that seed was always planted, and New York just really brought it out.
Yeah, there's something about New York, and when the mobile explosion hit, it seemed to be centered around a couple of centers, Austin and New York City. Mm-hmm. Silicon Valley seemed to be a distant, third, way back when it came to this, because a lot of the most innovative companies and innovative agencies are coming out of New York City because of the universities and the colleges down there. NYU was very strong in this, and then they brought in Internet Week, and then they brought in mobile components to that, and all of a sudden I started, during that time, I started on Tether around that same time, and it was every second company that I was interviewing was from New York City, so whatever it was, and it still sustains there. You got big companies, great companies, small companies, innovative companies, and including what you're doing with National Geographic and Project Noah. But so you graduated, then you won an award, you won some money. So then all of a sudden, this little project took off. It became a full-time business.
Yeah, it was. So Project Noah turned into kind of like a thesis project, basically, out of ITP. So I got together with a couple really close friends at ITP, and we decided to just see what we could pull off here, and we put together a quick prototype that we just made in our apartment, with a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of Red Bull. And then what I was also doing in parallel was just trying to go anywhere where I could just profess the vision and get it in front of an audience. So we have this Ignite NYC talk. I applied for all these different competitions, software development challenges. We ended up winning the grand prize of the Cooney Center's Breakthrough in Mobile Learning competition. It was their inaugural, their first time ever running it. And that's where we found out that the first responders in the Gulf actually modeled their, it was during the awards ceremony. And so we got $50,000 for winning that prize. And Joan Gans Cooney, just so you know, is the lady who started Sesame Street. So they have this really long heritage and legacy of like children's learning and engagement. And they really understood the power of mobile and play-based learning. So out of the final candidates, I flew over to Los Angeles, did a final pitch off. And Anish Chopra, who was the former CTO of the U.S., the first ever appointed by Barack Obama, he's the guy who handed over that big, dummy $50,000 check, and he's like, "Hey, I'd already been exposed to Project Noah during the Gulf Coast oil spill and stuff." And so it started, as a thesis project. We won that money, and we put it all of it, every dime of it, back into the project to expand it and to grow it. And the way we connected to National Geographic, and this is just kind of as one of the just tales of an entrepreneur. I mean, one of the things that you kind of have to remember always is to just be ready to go anytime to pitch your idea, because you never know who's going to be around or what's gonna happen. And so I'd been just kind of going every talk, going over to pitch, every pitch fest. Anyone who would lend me an ear, I would talk to them for a few minutes to get their feedback. And so arranged through our program was a pitch fest where you got a chance to pitch to Ron Conway, a legendary Silicon Valley investor. And so I'm like, okay, I have to do it. This is an amazing opportunity. Whether he likes the project or not doesn't matter. And so during the thesis week and all this stuff, and it's stressful, and I'm like, I'm so tired of talking about this damn project. And it came to the day before we were supposed to pitch to Ron, and I almost didn't go. I'm like, this is just, I'm just tired of it. I want to work on the project and kind of take a break. Anyway, forced myself to go. Ron Conway thought it was great. Dennis Crowley from Foursquare was there in the audience as well. We got great feedback. They're like, look, we were really early on. Like, we want to see how it grows, and there's, it's a fun little space you're playing in. And so it didn't really amount to much. But in the audience was a guy who I later connected with and became a strong business advisor and supporter for us, who was connected to National Geographic. He had friends at the executive level of National Geographic. And so a week later, I got a call from him to come down to his office, and he told me, I hope you have a few minutes. I have these executives from National Geographic on the phone. I've already pitched your project to them, and they're very interested. And so just from going to that talk, having someone in the audience that really the project resonated with, he went on his own and kind of made the connection for us. I showed up, just spewed my, what I've been spewing for the past few months. And it started from there, and that's how we got this relationship going with National Geographic.
So I'm going to take a quick step back, because I'm really interested to know, this is a thesis. How close, or while you were doing all of these pitches, while you were asking and speaking anywhere you could speak, which is the hustle, right? That's what it is. It's pure hustle. When you're doing that, did you have a prototype of this? Was it in field? Were you using this product? Were you sourcing things already? What were you using as a demonstration to get the interest that you did get?
We had a very basic prototype. It didn't look anything like what our software looks like today, but it had the same components. Underneath the hood, it was the same essential 3 modes. You could share a photo, you could join a mission, and you could use see what's been spotted around you, right? So that's what we call the location-based field guide mode. So we had the spotting mode, the mission mode, and the location-based field guide mode. It just looked kind of ugly, but it worked. And we had similarly on the web, we had a kind of a streamed, kind of a minimized and kind of simplistic interface. But we had, I think at that time maybe hundreds to thousands of initial users. And our grad program was leading the charge. Everyone in our class was downloading the app and playing around with it. But yeah, we had a very simplistic prototype that just showed people that, look, we're not just talk. We have something that's working, but we have a much, much grander vision of what we can do here if you are willing to hear us out and if you're willing to give us a little bit of financial support.
Why do you think they believed you? Because think about it, Yasser. There are people, like, you probably were inspired by the inefficiencies of collecting data today, right? The fact that, or before you started this, the fact that you can do this digitally and in real time, and basically coordinate around the world the data and collaborate with that data. Obviously, there's a number of holes that you guys are filling, but what do you think they looked at when they saw you bring this prototype to them and say, here it is, this is what we're doing? What gave them the confidence, National Geographic, to put money into you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the way I framed the whole pitch, if you will, was around this notion of this perfect storm that's brewing, right? All these things are falling into place, and we're on the kind of the front end of a completely, revolutionary time period, especially in mobile and when it comes to data collection and citizen science. And it's funny because, in typical kind of, strategic partnership, investment chat, pitch fashion, when I sat down in the National Geographic boardroom for the first time, everyone threw down their business cards. I'm the COO of this, or I'm the senior VP of this, or whatever it may be, And I flipped all those cards over, and National Geographic has this slogan, right? It's like inspiring people to care about the planet since 1888. And that's a pretty profound and awesome slogan. But what I immediately latched onto was like, look, we're at a point today where we need to go way beyond just standing on a soapbox and trying to inspire people. We need to give people tools and opportunities to participate and be a part of these ongoing studies and research projects or explorations, right? Gone are the days where we sit back and we're just kind of consuming stuff and just taking in what happens. Now anyone in their backyard can become a National Geographic explorer. And so I posed a question to them: if the founders of National Geographic were sitting at a table today and were dreaming up the idea of the National Geographic Society, what would it look like? And I told them that I think it would look a lot like Project Noah. And they believed that. And I gave them an idea of kind of the vision of where we were going and what was possible with building a community like this and rallying a community around this. And they looked at it exactly like that, as a natural segue and evolution of this idea of documenting, exploring the planet, and getting people mesmerized, reconnected, reawakening that kind of childlike curiosity that we had for the world when we were kids, but using a modern tool set, right?
It is inspiring, and that would rally the troops. And I wonder if anybody has ever gone to them and pitched them like this, because it sounds like to me that this is the future of National Geographic. I mean, they're known for their stunning photography and being where they should be at the right time and capturing those moments. But what they really, the future of this is in this crowdsourcing piece is that they can gather so much more information. They can be more relevant if they do something like this. So it makes sense. But I always wonder these things, like, what is it that resonates? Because at some point you've got a bunch of suits sitting around a table who have run a business the same way for so long, and they're looking for ways to change. And their app is beautiful. Their iPad app is stunning, right? So they're looking at different business models, but they're still in the context of their existing business, right? Which is this. And then you come along, which is way over here, and you say, and the light just goes off, and they're like, holy, if we're not doing that, that's good. These guys are going to be us, and we're going to be over here unemployed somewhere, right? So I always wonder about that. Like, somebody must have pitched that, but you probably just did a more passionate job of that.
No, I mean, I think you're right though, and from their perspective, and they had never really done specifically like a deal specifically like this, in kind of the way we set things up. But you're right. I mean, they came from a variety of backgrounds, from media backgrounds and stuff, and they looked at us like we were a 3-person team. We had built the stuff out of our apartment. We didn't have a lot of overhead. We weren't asking for a lot of money. For them, it was like, look, maybe these guys are onto something. Maybe they're not. They're not putting in, $50 billion to see if it happens. It's planting a little seed. And that's the way the relationship worked. The first thing was just some seed capital to say, hey, look, if you don't believe in what I'm talking about, give me a little bit of money and we'll show you what we can do. We were able to far exceed their expectations. And then they came back and became a Series A proper, investor in the company that we created.
So, I mean, they must obviously look at this. And, I'm going to bring it back to mobile because I can get carried away with this because I'm so fascinated by what you're doing. But here's a perfect example. Everybody out there listening is that you gotta think that without this mobile, the impact of mobile, 1 billion smartphones out there, 5 billion connected devices and growing, and the ease and ease of use of these tools and the app economy, without all of that, National Geographic could have continued down the road doing what they were doing, which is a lot, and it's great work. But one little shift, one little wrinkle in technology, and mobile takes off, and it can disrupt their entire business overnight, it would seem, because upstarts like Project Noah could come in here and do the things that are necessary with a crowdsourced volunteer science base, right? Like it's pretty amazing, when it comes to the impact that this industry is having on other industries and other companies. We're seeing that everywhere. Very cool.
It's a massive upheaval too. When you think about it, if you take a moment to think about it, whether it's National Geographic or some other media company, for centuries, National Geographic was founded in 1888. They have owned the relationship with the customer, their reader, right? They had a direct contact to them as a member of the society, as a subscriber. National Geographic had a direct line of communication with them. But when you look at things like the iPad blowing up, right? Immediately, right off the bat, National Geographic is kind of an order of magnitude kind of moved away from that connection to the end user, right? And so they're having to evolve into this world, this ecosystem, where they're not just connecting directly to users, but there's all these different tools and platforms and capabilities that they have to use in a smart way. It took them a little while, but now their iPad app is like you said, it's stunningly beautiful, but it takes some time it's a little bit of that pridefulness too, like, we are National Geographic, or we're this media conglomerate. This is how we talk to our users. But guess what? Your users aren't using your stuff. They're using iPads. And that's kind of the wave of the future. And so you need to get your act together and get onto those platforms. And so when you look at kind of the shifting landscape and the importance, the kind of disruptive power of these mobile platforms, that's what's shaking all these old dinosaurs up, right? They don't know what to do. It's like a different language and tool set is being required now.
Well, and what I'd love to see is that they're looking at opportunities that are in their expected wheelhouse. You know what I mean? Like, what do we go to for National Geographic for this kind of stuff, right? And instead of building, maybe they've done this, but instead of building, the rush to build an app, so they built that, but it's around their photography, which is very complementary to what they're doing. But they didn't go out and build a game, right? Which was completely out in left field. It's not something that they do that to create engagement with their customer base. That's why I look at this, is that with what you're doing, it's a natural reach. It's a reach into everybody's house, every child, everybody who's in school that's using this tool. It re-cements the brand National Geographic. And I think that, very smart. Small bet in you guys, potentially huge outcome. And I think it's like a match made in heaven, really, quite frankly.
Yeah, we feel the same way too. I mean, during that quick time period where we were kind of trying to figure out where we were going to get funding, we talked to a couple different organizations as well, the people behind Discovery Channel, the Nature Publishing Group, which is Scientific American, and Science Journal, like some very prestigious and equally as old, organizations. But when it came down to it, National Geographic's audience and their brand was like the match made in heaven. If you look at these other groups like Scientific American, they're a wonderful organization and publication, but their readers are much more like deeply into science. They have advanced degrees. And we wanted to really kind of captivate those amateurs, these people who had never shared a photo of wildlife before, the people who don't know the Latin genus and species names of what they're looking at, but are curious as heck to find out. And so National Geographic was the idealistic, perfect, match made in heaven partner, and they've been a great supporter.
How long did that process take from start to finish, where the introduction happened and you ended up sitting in their office in New York?
That's a great question, man. It was, when you're finishing grad school and you've given up your corporate gig and sunk all your savings into, pay for tuition and stuff, it couldn't have happened fast enough, right? I mean, we're graduating. The 2 weeks before I was actually graduating and presenting our thesis projects, I was skipping my last kind of final classes to go and pitch and negotiate with National Geographic, right? So it took 6-7 months to get the seed capital going, and I was on the verge. We were all on the verge of collapse. We had zero funds. We had no food. We were running low on rations. And I think if it had taken a couple months longer, we might not have made it. We had maximized all the money that we'd used from the competition we had won. We put it into the software that was launched. But it took about 6 or 7 months. And again, we went through the Series A process. It was a little quicker, but roughly, scale was about the same amount of time.
Yeah, I love those stories because it's, just when you think that you can't hang on anymore, you find a way to hang on just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And I think that's the tenacity of the entrepreneur. And you find a way, and it ends up being, every piece of a good organization. There's a little bit of serendipity in there. Actually, I'd say a lot of serendipity. I heard a VC describe it to me very clearly. He said, look, Rob, serendipity is a nice word for shit luck, right? Is that, I've sat with entrepreneurs on this show that were sitting next to a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, and that guy happened to be, Steve Jobs, or that guy happened to be, Ev Williams over Twitter, right? And it just, and it's the same way. Like, I had a fever of 102, but I said, like, I gotta get out there, I gotta pitch, I gotta get to this event, and it turns out to be the event that they needed to be in for their entire life. It set them on a path. So, right. There is that little piece of luck, but you have to position yourself properly. So I love what you guys have done with Project Noah. Now, you're in here. You're in the middle of this thing. How do you disclose numbers, like how many people have submitted things, how many users you have, what the hit rate is, how many species you have inside of the application? Do you actually publicize that information?
Yeah, I mean, I can share some of the latest stats that I have with you guys. So just to kind of give you an idea of the scale and scope of kind of our community. So we have well over 100,000 registered users from around the world. We've seen over 215,000 wildlife observations, so we call them spottings, and that translates to, we're coming close to about 500,000 photos covering all 7 continents. And like I said, we are seeing activity every minute of every day now, whether it's a new photo coming in, someone identifying a species for someone else, someone joining a mission, someone creating a mission, whatever that activity may be, we're seeing something, some form, every minute of every day. And on the iPhone front, when we talk about serendipity and it's kind of like luck, when we launched our initial app, it was pretty buggy. We needed to get it out the door. We didn't have much more time to work on it, and we had National Geographic and a whole host of other people like really looking at us to see what we delivered. And we made a mistake, and we submitted it with a minimal software requirement that was incorrect, actually. So it was a version below where you actually needed to be in order to download the app. So we got massacred in the reviews, right? So we got like 1-star reviews. App doesn't even launch. App doesn't even load. This is a bunch of crap, And we were so devastated. We're like, oh my god, this is so horrible. But anyway,
wait, don't gloss over that. How did you recover from that?
You know, the way I looked at it is we got so many amazing people that became power users and that just became fanatics through that exposure, right?
The hatred,
And
like
they
you
understood.
got good exposure from people blasting what you were doing.
So on the flip side, so if you look at just kind of the review systems in general, right? What they usually do is they bring out two people: the people that are really pissed off, or the people that are exuberant, right? There's really not much in between that people spend time kind of talking about. So we did get a lot of hatred, like this app doesn't work, that's baloney. But we were quick to respond and we made some changes. But on the flip side, it turned people on to this. Like they're like, wow, I never thought that you can maybe even do something. I didn't even know someone had been thinking about building an app like this. Or, you know, we'd always get the thing like, this is an app that I've always wanted to build, this is amazing. And so it was a double-edged sword, man. We got massacred in the ratings initially, but we got so much exposure. I mean, we were getting like 10,000 downloads of the app on a daily basis at the time, you know, and that just really blew us up, you know, out of the gate. So it was tough, and we're still recovering from that, you know, like original 1-star review of our initial app. You know, our current app is phenomenal. If you read the reviews, they're, you know, amazing testimonials. And so it's like a 5-star review, you know, 4.5, 5-star review of our current version. But because we had so many 1-star ratings early on, our overall average is like a 3-star rating. And it pisses me off because I'm like, man, you know, I just want to purge those old, it was an old code base and we've completely refactored it. But, you know, you kind of roll with it. And I think had we missed that opportunity, we would have missed a big chance to get in front of a huge receptive audience. And people, if you're upfront and you let them know and they see that you're working hard to improve the app and they have visual, tangible evidence that it's improving and it's becoming stabilized, you can win them over. And we've, you know, every person that left a bad review, we tried to track them down and let them know that we're working on it to make it better.
Track them down, break their kneecaps if they don't go back.
Go to their homes, you know.
Well, some people just hate for the sake of hating, but you know, it's always interesting because you know, as much as you do, the effort that you go in, the amount of money, the amount of blood, sweat, tears, starvation, pounds that you lose, how many ramen noodles that you eat, goes into this product. And to see a 1-star review is just like a dagger to the heart, isn't it? But it's an ego thing, right? It hurts you, but then you know the impact of a 1-star in the App Store when you're trying to build a company. It's like, it's devastating.
It's hard. It hurts, man. And you're just kind of, you have this sense of desperation. You're frustrated. You're tired. You're weak. And I'll give you a perfect example of what happened is that during that tumultuous time period when you went from like sitting on top of the mountain, we're about to, you know, blow National Geographic away to this kind of like thud of a product launch, you know. We got this email. I got an email from a parent in New Zealand, and she sent me some photos of her 9-year-old daughter. And she had been using Project Noah. She was homeschooled, and she was using Project Noah to participate in a science fair. So she'd been documenting nature in and around her little area in New Zealand. And she sent me these photos. And this is the most, and she went by Bug Girl 1. That was her nickname, you know, in Project Noah, her username. And the most adorable little kid standing in front of this trifold, you know, science fair project with the Project Noah logo drawn by hand in paint, and her mom writing this, like, you know, really emotional thing about how my daughter is reconnected to nature. We're spending time together. This is the most amazing thing we've come across. Like we had like an emotional, we got emotional over this, you know, because we were stressed and overworked, and we saw this with this email and the photos. I mean, the email alone was heartbreaking, you know, in an amazing way. But the photos just, you know, we just lost it, you know, and it was just like, this is why we're doing it. You know, someone on the other side of the planet, right? We're in New York, no one, you know, not knowing who's using the app, that sort of stuff. And a kid from New Zealand is going nuts over this, and like it's changed their life, you know, as a family. And so we had this, like, we're like, look, we're just getting started, man. This is like, we're going to build a movement. This is what it's all about. And we just had this like renewed sense of purpose and just kind of tenacity. We're like, we're not going to give up. We're doing it for Bug Girl 1 and all the other people around here. And what's crazy is that shortly thereafter, there was a massive earthquake in New Zealand. And we got another follow-up. You know, we were like, you know, how is the family doing? How's everyone doing? We got a follow-up email, and they were having so many aftershocks that this user I mentioned, Bug Girl 1, her name's Luca, she was so kind of nervous and scared of being indoors where the house was like would shake with every aftershock. They started using Project Noah again to get outside. So it became a way to deal with this stress of this, like, you know, earthquake. And so that's the type of technology that we're excited about, this pervasive, you know, personal that can only come from mobile. You can't sit behind a desktop machine and have this sort of experience. It becomes an extension of who you are, an extension of you as a person, and that's the power that we're tapping into with this project.
I don't even know where to go from here after that story. That's awesome. Like you know, it really is. It's a you know, when you combine all of those things, this is why you do these things. For the very first time, you've got this ability to democratize borders. You break down borders. You bring it everywhere. You allow people to use these tools. You're gathering information, and to get a letter like that, it just is uplifting and inspiring, and it pushes you to that. You know, you do it for Bug Girl 1 kind of mentality. I love that. I hope you had that in a poster somewhere in the office. Just Bug Girl 1. Do it for Bug Girl 1. So
yeah, you know, but that you bring up a really great point though about this whole idea of this, you know, mass amateurization of science, right? You know, if you talk about, like, for example, from the grad program I went to, there's a guy named Clay Shirky whose name, or you know, you've probably come across, you know, his books and his kind of thoughts. And before where we're at today, you know, when you look at like YouTube, right, coming around 2005, there's this what we call what has become known as kind of like mass amateurization of media, right? Whereas in the past, you had to have $1 million budget and a full-on, you know, fancy schmancy, you know, video production unit to go out and create a video that would get 1 million views. And now some kid, you know, in their basement or wherever can do a 5-minute or 5-second video and 10 million people will see it. We're seeing a very similar kind of amateurization in science. So this notion of the mass amateurization of science is happening, and it's a big storm that's brewing as well. Project Noah is just one part of this larger movement. And so when you look at these opportunities for people to contribute observations, data points, that's one way where anyone with the camera, I mean, if you scrape away all the stuff that Project Noah has, the logos, the icons, the brands, and all that stuff, it's just a platform for people to share observational data. That data could be graffiti, it could be, you know, potholes on your street, it could be, you know, weather patterns or whatever it may be. We just happen to be obsessed with nature and wildlife. But with more and more opportunities for people to contribute data points, and there's more and more opportunities for people to actually participate in analysis. So if you look at like Galaxy Zoo, you can help scientists actually classify galaxies by just taking a few moments to look at some photos on your desktop. And a good friend of mine just launched a really awesome project, which is it's a Kickstarter for science called petridish.org. And so now what's happening is that you have all kind of prongs ready to go. So not only can you participate in science, but with projects like, you know, Petri Dish, you can actually fund with your own dollars the scientific projects that you're most interested in, rather than waiting for, you know, government or whoever else to go and support that sort of thing. And there's this big push about providing that data to the masses and not having to pay, you know, hundreds or thousands of dollars to have a subscription to a journal where the data that your tax dollars are paying are being published. Everyone should have access to it. So what we saw, this upheaval that we saw in the media landscape, we're just starting to see that in this crack in the facade of this ivory tower of science is kind of running up that tower. And projects like ours and Petri Dish and these others are leading that charge.
So you're obviously seeing lots of opportunity in what you're doing in other verticals and other areas. As you said, like it can be something like civic responsibility, you know, it can be documenting graffiti or potholes, but it also can, what other ideas, like as you're building this, you're building a platform obviously, and you're looking around, do you have that shiny object syndrome where you're like, hey, we could do it over here, and we could bring it over here, we could bring it over here? Do you have a hard time keeping it straight? And what are those other opportunities that you're looking at that they just must be coming at you now?
Yeah, I mean, so what I've tried to become better at, and it's a never-ending process, is to have like the 100-year vision and then the 100-day vision, right? So, you know, thinking about the future where we can, you know, on the fly identify a species for you using some crazy, you know, computer vision algorithm, you know, all that crazy stuff out there versus, you know, the next 100 days, right? So from the very beginning, we always approach this as a community building exercise, right? And what you're seeing is, you know, all this technology and all this fight for our attention, and Facebook taking over the web, and, you know, everyone's connected, you know, logged into Facebook as they surf the web and crawl the web. What people are looking for are more personalized and more intimate experiences, right? When you think about the long tail and the power of just kind of the digitization, is that, you know, if you were a kid who happened to be obsessed with moths in New York City in the, you know, 1950s, you're pretty shit out of luck, right? I mean, if you're lucky, you go to the library, you might pick up a book, you might bump into someone at a bus stop who was looking at a, you know,
you like moths? You like moths? Yeah, me too. It's like, yeah.
people think you're really weird, so most people probably don't talk about it. But today, you can create a Project Noah mission around moths, and you can go out and meet people from around the world who are sharing photos of moths and helping you identify them. And so, we're playing in this exact same space now. And so some of the things that we're thinking about is how do we extend our technology in our infrastructure to help other organizations kind of capitalize off of this audience building and community building, right? We get pulled in a lot of directions. We had art museums say, hey, we want to build like the Project Noah for art, people sharing their encounters with art around the world. That's awesome. I think that'd be an amazing thing. Street art, graffiti. There's lots of apps popping up around where can you see the coolest graffiti art? Where did Banksy strike last? Whatever it may be. Citizen reporting, citizen journalism. You see it all around the board. But I'm just too obsessed with nature and wildlife, and so we're building a framework. Converting our platform into a framework, and we're working on some really exciting projects with large nationwide institutions and agencies who are required to manage large swaths of land, right? So it's a botanical garden, or it's a native plant garden of 25 or 25,000 acres, and they need to document that stuff. And they need to get tools into people's hands so they can maintain the data around them. And so what we're coming up with is a way for people to harness the power of the platform that we've built for their specific kind of customized sort of nature observation deal, right? So whether it's you're overseeing 25,000 acres and you need to know what pests are where at what time, or you're a group of fishermen and you want to document the places where you've seen the best fish catches coming in. Project Noah's engine can be used for that, and so we're coming up with the framework. We're working through it on how to power that among a bunch of other things too.
I think the possibilities on this are pretty much endless, right? But at some point, you got to be looking at this, or are you looking at this? How do you turn something like this into revenue? Because I'm going to follow this with a couple more questions, and then I think I'll have monopolized like 7 hours of your time going through this. Yeah. So my first question is around monetization and your thoughts on generating revenue. I mean, I'm a big lover of revenue. I can't help it. That's what being an entrepreneur is ultimately about, to be able to continue doing that thing that you love. But then it's also around how do you market this? How have you been able to extend the reach? How have you pushed this out? And then the last layer around this is an education piece, because this is by far one of the greatest science experiments ever. Right? If this is a course into itself. Teachers out there who are looking at this, they must be thinking, "Oh my God, I can just stick my kids outside and they can learn. This is great. I can send them home. Their parents can teach them." So I want to talk about that. But first off,
sure.
What about the revenue side? Have you thought about the revenue?
Yeah, I mean, when we envisioned this project and establishing a company, the first question we were asked is, are you guys a nonprofit, or are you guys going to be a for-profit? A lot of people in this space are nonprofits, and my response was like, look, even if you're a nonprofit, you need profit, right? You need to make money to keep going. And so we, from the bat, created a for-profit company because we felt as though we could come up with smart ways to generate revenue. We're a lean, mean machine. We don't have millions of dollars in overhead. We don't need a lot to cover our costs. And so we set out from the gate to be a for-profit company. We're still in the process of figuring out how to generate revenue. We haven't brought in any revenue as of yet. This year will be the first year we actually see revenue coming in through some partnerships and stuff that we're doing. But to expand off of that, like, look, we're in the kind of role of building a dedicated and like ravenous community, right? We have 100,000 registered users. It's not much when you compare it to like Facebook or Pinterest or Instagram. But we've kind of built this from the beginning to be more about quality over quantity. We're not just going out and just trying to get a million crazy people. The people that come to Project Noah are diehard nature nerds, right? Or aspiring nature nerds. And so we're continuing to grow on that. We're looking at ways to bring in the right partners and stuff to tap into that audience. So one of the biggest things that we're seeing is, like, for example, we work with the National Wildlife Federation, a really large and prestigious nature organization, nonprofit in the U.S. And I was told that they have more members over the age of 55 than they do under the age of 18, right? So these organizations that have been around, like the Audubon societies, for 100 years plus, they're dying, like they have like a negative growth rate, right? So they're struggling. And like the Nature Conservancy, for example, sits on over $1 billion of an endowment, right? And so they actually have a boatload of money. They just don't have any new users coming in. And so they're trying to figure out ways to tap into that next Charles Darwin, that next Jane Goodall. And so Project Noah has been positioned as your gateway to that world, right? And so we have some really exciting things that we're pulling together. So a branded kind of co-promotional campaigns. We've tested a few things out. So we did the National Wildlife Federation every year does a Wildlife Week event, and so this was the first year they did a Wildlife Week Project Noah mission, and we created a custom, Wildlife Week patch for them. So people from around the world were contributing, earning the patch. We did a promo stuff through our Facebook and kind of social media channels as well. We've been approached by some large TV channels. National Geographic is our parent, so there's a lot of cool stuff around show tie-ins and stuff that we're working on. So that's one way we're looking at it. Coming up with strategic partners that are willing to pay for access to this kind of growing and thriving community. We're looking at kind of harnessing our software in smart ways that doesn't break our back or force us to re-engineer what we've already built. The challenge with doing these kind of like white label customization gigs is like you can be killed by a million cuts and lose the power that you built. But we've basically set it up in a way is like, look, if you're willing to use our app in this fashion that we've already built, then we're willing to talk to you about how we can maybe move forward with that. But if you want some crazy customization, go out and build your own app, right? So if they like what we've built, they can tap into it. If not, they can kind of learn from us and build their own app. So those are some of the ideas. Really quickly, we get a lot of, and this isn't $1 billion business, but like I said, we have not that much overhead. We get so much requests for swag, right? Like you earn these patches online. And people, I wish I could share you some of the emails I get. So, one grandparent, I think in the UK, you can't buy physical patches, Project Noah patches yet. We're working on it. We just printed out our first batch ever. And we get bombarded, I need to buy these for my grandsons. And I'm like, sorry, you can't buy them yet. Well, can you send me the art files and I'll print them out for you and I'll give you all the extras. I just need to get them for my kids. And so we're in the process of putting together a simple storefront. And lastly, we're looking and we're keen to just kind of all sorts of kind of tangential but connected opportunities to let people showcase the content they've created. So what's great about Instagram is the whole ecosystem that's evolved around it. So Insta Canvas and Canvas Pop, people are printing out these photos that turned out to be quite beautiful or that happen to be serendipitous and they will never have a chance to shoot a photo like that again. So people have expressed interest in being able to kind of create more presentable versions and keepsakes of the digital photos that they've contributed to Project Noah. And one thing we're looking at is the ability for people to create their own digital field guides, right? So I'll give you an example. So we have a lot of teachers creating Project Noah classrooms, just some new capabilities we offer to educators and teachers that we recently launched. So imagine if you're a teacher, Rob, and you have a 6th grade class and you're documenting the nature on your school campus for a semester. At the end of that semester, you'll have hundreds of photos submitted by your classroom and your students and probably you as well. So coming up with the way that you can create like a nature yearbook, right? So this is the class's observations, and so maybe a digital version is free or a few bucks, but a bound version that parents want, that they want to have in the classroom, maybe it's 25, 30 bucks, whatever. So we're looking at quick ways of doing that and things around that. So we're looking at simple ways where we can make a big impact, but most importantly, we want the monetization opportunities to be things that our audience really wants to pay for. We don't want to slap a bunch of ads on there and make it really crappy and a horrible experience, but we're being pulled in directions. What we have here is a really cool problem in that everyone we meet wants us to succeed. They really like what we're doing, and everyone we talk to wants to give us a few bucks. So, we have this support system, we have this enthusiasm. We just need to come up with, palatable, digestible, simple ways for people to give us a few bucks. And if we can do that, we'll do more than just cover our simple overhead. We might turn into a profitable and growing business.
Which is the hope, right? And there is that fine line of building up a user base, a very valuable user base. 100,000 people. You got to think about it in context. I'm pretty sure when you started this out, you're like, what's our magic number? Oh man, wouldn't it be great if 1,000 people use this? Yeah, 100.
Happy with 100 the first
week. And so now you're at 100,000. You're like, well, that is an incredible number of people doing 500. Over 500,000 photos. Is that what you said?
We're getting close to half
Yeah,
a million.
around the world, people that you're touching as a result of releasing the software, now you've got to always be concerned. Here is that okay? So now how there is, as you said, a palatable way to turn revenue on, finding that palatable way without destroying the experience is important, obviously. Yeah. So how do you create awareness? This is our last question. I mean, how do you create awareness here? What are, this is a big project. You need large numbers. You need global contributions. How is it that you were able to create awareness for this thing, to even drive 100,000 downloads, which to me is a large number, right?
Yeah, no. So really quickly, the notion of your user base is it's a metric that everyone gets grilled on. If you're sharing photos, you're automatically being compared to Instagram. If you're building kind of a social network on web, you're compared to Facebook and Pinterest immediately. But it's important to take a moment to look at the context, the environment in which you're kind of forging ahead. So to give you a quick example, 100,000, obviously it's less than the tens of millions that other mobile apps and communities have. But if you compare that number to the space we're playing in and other players in the space, like for example, the Encyclopedia of Life, EOL.org, right, which was this big initiative dreamed up by E.O. Wilson, a hero of mine. It's a Pulitzer Prize-winning nature scientist. The guy who coined the term biophilia and talks about our inherent connection to the natural world. Encyclopedia of Life was started with $50 million pledged by these nonprofit organizations around the world. They started about a year and a half, maybe 2 years before Project Noah, and their goal is to create like a Wikipedia for nature. So every living organism on the planet will have eventually a Wikipedia-style informational page. To date, they have about 55,000 registered users, right? So in this space, we are becoming like the equivalent of an Instagram or a Pinterest, right? And that's what you have to kind of keep in mind, because you have to be judged by kind of your compatriots and the people you're kind of in. And then when you're trying to build a business, obviously the larger numbers become more powerful and more helpful. But to kind of switch into the notion of how do we continue to grow, right? What we found early on is that, look, I am the chief leaf. I am part of a 2-person social media team. We're product managers, we're business developers, we're designers, testers. We're all these hats, right? And so we learned really quickly that technology and being smart and savvy with these tools was going to be our leg up, right? So we have latched onto tools and kind of social media platforms that we feel are really powerful for this. And Facebook has been a perfect example for this. So really early on, we created a Facebook page, and we started just every day we have a spotting of the day. So we take one photo that's really beautiful and eye-catching and mesmerizing, and we highlight it across Facebook, Twitter, and our website, and we give mad props to the person who submitted it. You get a custom fame patch. It looks like a Hollywood Walk of Fame star. You get blown up on Facebook and Twitter and that sort of stuff. And we've done that religiously, man, like religiously. I'm on vacation, and I'll log on and make sure I got connections just so I can have the spotting of the day, and we make sure we keep that growing. And so we have over 250,000 Facebook fans now, and we reach over 1 million people on a weekly basis. And so again, in context, comparing to like the National Resource Defense Council, which is like a large lobbying body that has a whole team of social media people working on it, Tree Hugger, the National Audubon Society, and the National Wildlife Federation, we actually have a much larger Facebook community than some of these iconic 100-year-old institutions. And it's all from just understanding the power of that tool. And like what it comes down to is compelling content, right? People talking about your stuff. It's a crazy photo that spreads. So Facebook has been huge for us. Twitter has been okay. It's kind of the things that we've just had to do, and we've been doing early on. We have about 4,000 or so followers on Twitter. We don't see as much crazy engagement stuff spreading as like wildfire as we do on Facebook. But it's really just been these organic things, and we've been really lucky by popping out some like really cool sound bites that we've had press from Apple promote. We've been featured like 5 or 6 times by Apple in the App Store and app stores around the world. We've been featured in Mashable and CNN and The Economist, and even TechCrunch and these things, here and there. So we've been lucky with what we're working on is cool, and the way we framed it is fun and engaging enough that when people are looking for cool stuff to write about, we have all this stuff ready for them to just kind of regurgitate in their articles. We've just been kind of lucky in that sense, and so we've been able to battle these larger organizations just through being a little savvy and just kind of relentless on the social media front.
It's, you know what, I think it comes down to idea, right? Is that when the idea resonates, and it is, as you said earlier on, it's this perfect storm that's happening right now as a result of mobile and as a result of citizen participation everywhere, and a thirst for knowledge. All of a sudden, you've got a great story here that is compelling for every media outlet. Everybody who as you said, has been a closet collector or a closet lover of moths. Oh man, that's like so full of pun. Closet lover of moths. Now all of a sudden they can rejoice because they can step out and become moth experts. And
yeah, man. I was just going to say, I mean, as an entrepreneur, it's your duty to kind of package and present your project in a way that's palatable, that makes sense, that resonates. For us, we latched onto this notion that technology has been kind of cast under the shadow of dehumanizing, right? Everyone's seen that photo of everyone sitting at the dinner table, text messaging and checking email, and they're not looking at each other, right? So we looked at that as an opportunity for us to frame our project as the complete reversal of that, using the technology to become more connected to the world and in the environment than ever before, right? And so that's resonated because there's, for every 100 articles that are out there about how technology is ruining us and screwing us over and thwarting our creativity or curiosity or whatever, here comes a project like Project Noah, and it's positioned in a way to be like, you know what, that's actually not true. Here's an awesome example of how technology can be used for great good. And that's really important, is how to kind of position and frame whatever project you're working on to an audience that's going to bite on it. And that's been kind of something we've tried to do smartly from the very beginning.
Oh yeah, so this is you know what, this has been incredible. It's been inspiring, and for those who are still watching or listening, you can sense that these guys are on to something that is something that we've never seen before, something that would have taken generations or lifetimes, many lifetimes, in order to be able to do what you're trying to do in a very short period of time with a very small budget and a global population that is, and as you said, like the pulse of Mother Nature, the pulse of the planet changes so quickly, and ultimately this can become our alert system, can't it? When we start to see declining populations in a specific type of plant or a specific animal or a specific bug, what does that mean? And you start to be able to then put some analytics around this, and I can't wait for that day when all of a sudden we have that kind of information at our fingertips and we can really start to listen to what's going on the planet.
My dream with this whole project is one day for like a 9-year-old kid in Montana or Mexico or wherever to discover a new species. You turn over that rock, you snap a photo. It's interesting to you at a kind of a very surface level, but it turns out it's never been seen before, right? And we've come so close, man. I really feel that in our database that there probably is a new discovery. We might have missed it. But just a couple really quick data points I wanted, because the take-home message that I want people to have here is that, look, this is only possible because of the power and prevalence of mobile. I mean, this is a fully mobile kind of aspirational project. It's driven by this passion about doing good and reconnecting people and creating a new generation of nature stewards and nature lovers. But it's not just kind of good feelings and stuff like that. There's actually some palpable, real kind of impacts being made. So I'll give you a couple really quick examples. So a hiker in India, just an amateur, not a scientist or naturalist or anything like that, was hiking and saw a flower in the kind of morning dew that caught his eye. Took a photo of it. It's beautiful. He thought it was an orchid. I thought it was an orchid. I'm not a plant expert by any means. Came into our system, and a couple of our resident plant experts are like, hey, that's a beautiful photo, but it's definitely not an orchid. It's not an orchid at all. And so we're like, okay, cool. Well, what kind of plant is it? We couldn't figure out what it was, right? So for a few moments, I was like, holy crap, this could be our new discovery. Some amateur hiker in India discovered this new plant. Anyway, to make a long story short, it turned out that it wasn't a brand new species, but we reached out to the guy who actually wrote the field guide for this particular type of plant. It's called an impatiens plant. And now we have one of the only known photographs of this particular species because all the identification was done through these like old school hand-drawn illustration field guides and stuff, right? So that's one quick example. Another idea, we talked about serendipity earlier on, right? And this notion of being prepared and connecting things. It's this whole idea of luck and creating your own luck and stuff. But one of the things we talk about doing is how do you engineer serendipity, right? From a product perspective. And so a perfect example of this in play is a guy in Maine, on the northeastern coast of the U.S., was in a national park and took a photo of a bird that's called an American oyster catcher, a really beautiful bird with a long orange beak, very iconic and amazing to see. Took a photo of it just because he thought it was a really cool looking bird. Submitted it to Project Noah. In his photo, you can barely make out the bands. It was a bird that was banded by a scientist. It turns out that the dude who actually banded the bird came across the photo in our database.
Come on.
And there's I'll show you the link. This comment, you can see the comments are all there. He asked this, really kind of nice question, like, "Hey, I think I might have banded this bird. Do you have more photos of the bird ID?" It turns out he banded the bird, so we knew where that bird was born, where it had been seen, over the past couple years, and it had never been seen this north before. So it's the northernmost observation of American oyster catcher on record, and it happened because this user looked at Project Noah as a way to share those encounters, and this scientist looked at it as a place to see this mass data being collected, right? And so those are two quick examples, and we almost had a new species of a bug that was found in Malaysia. We came so close, man. I'm just waiting for that moment to happen. And it's not going to count for me unless it's discovered by an amateur. Because there's lots of scientists who are out there, like in Borneo, and they go out with the sole purpose to find new species. And we've talked to them about promoting or sharing their first photos of that new species through Project Noah, and that would be fantastic, no doubt. But I'm not going to be really fully satisfied until it's like some layperson who has no idea what they're doing, who just made some big discovery. And finally, on the flip side, so this idea of making scientific breakthroughs, but just as being kind of like, think of us as like a PR agency for the planet, right? We want to get people excited. And so recently, what happened just about a week ago, one of our most popular underwater photographers, a guy named Gerardo from the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, submit some of the most amazing underwater photographs. We got him hooked on taking photos of like land-based animals too. There's a whole, big part of the planet, the 25–30% that's not underwater that he's now been captivated by. He took a photo of this crazy caterpillar, and he submitted to Project Noah. It's amazing. It looks like it's made out of blown glass. But anyways, about a week ago, that caterpillar photo went viral. So it got boinged. It was hit by Gizmodo. We had our biggest 24-hour period of web traffic ever. And Scientific American did a follow-up blog post where they said, look, this is one of the few examples where a larva has spread virally across the web. So because of that encounter, because of that kind of propagation of that message, we got thousands of people, probably millions ultimately, that have viewed this caterpillar now, are exposed to a species that didn't even know existed on this planet, man. And that's what it's all about, is like reawakening that crazy imagination and kind of passion for nature. And so by becoming a place for people to kind of look for nature, be exposed to some really wildlife, and then kind of being a platform for collecting data, we're doing our part to really create a movement. And like I said earlier, amass this like large army of nature nerds.
I just pulled up it was the jewel caterpillar. Yeah, so I just put it up on screen as you're talking there, because
it looks like it's blown glass, man. The reason why it spread was because people thought it was a computer generated image. They're like, this can't be real.
I mean, it looks pretty pretty incredible. But that's the thing. It is discovery, and that's why I love what you're doing. I love the fact that mobile was the enabler here, was the facilitator for this, and it will be for some time. And you think about as these devices, and we're going to have to end soon, because or else we're just going to keep talking about how these devices become, ancillary scientific tools, where you can gauge temperature. And you're tagging everything, obviously, with a location, longitude and latitude. But then you can also get, you can understand wind patterns, and you can understand these things all from the sensors on these devices. And I think that all of a sudden, the sky is the limit, and that's what you're demonstrating here. Is that no industry, no profession is safe from the impact that mobile is having. So if you haven't applied a mobile lens through your business right now, take a look at what Project Noah is doing right now, because it could have disrupted something like National Geographic and any other organization like this, the same way that that digital has disrupted, Encyclopedia Britannica. Those days are changing. The world is changing. You start using these devices like what Yasser's doing with Project Noah. Man.
Thanks, man. I mean, we're going to keep chugging. I mean, our dream is to have the equivalent of a biological research station and a nature observatory in every schoolyard and backyard, man. And we're trying to build the software to power that. So, we're excited about it, and we're looking forward to just getting more and more kids turned to the green side.
Turn to the green side. All right, so we should just send everybody to projectnoah.org, right? Okay. Right. So go to Project.
And if you're looking for apps, it's you can search for Project Noah, NOAH.
I pulled up during this. I pulled up a few of the screenshots as I was playing with the app, and you'll see the richness, the beauty of it, and ease of use. And we didn't talk about any of that stuff because this project is so fascinating, and it just shows you the impact that mobile is having on what we do, how we do things, our planet, right? The mobile is going to enable Project Noah to actually build a measurement of the pulse of the planet. Crazy, crazy. Yasser, man, I can't thank you enough for doing this. This has been so great. I've been engaged, engulfed, and entranced by what you guys are doing. I love what you're doing with Project Noah. My kids use it. Everybody should be using these things. Go download the app. Go to Project Noah. Thank you for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Had a blast, man. More than a pleasure.
Chief Leaf, Yasser Ansari. Go to projectnoah.org. You will not regret it. Just even if you're browsing, go and take a look at it. If you can identify anything, do it. If you found something and you participated, reach out. Reach out to me at untethered@gmail.com. If you have any comments, leave them below. This has been another episode of Untether.tv. Thank you for watching, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Yasser.
Cheers.